So very good morning to everyone, and very interesting session that we've picked up, especially after COVID, which will be relevant. We think it's going to be relevant. A lot of takeaways. We've had some interesting discussions before this session started. There are a lot of inputs, a lot of key learnings that we are going to get out of this. But when you talk of supply chain, there are some very old notions that we have to keep in mind. I tried picking up a very old notion that was from supply chain. सही product सही दाम पे सही जगह पे पहुंचना चाहिए, and that's the key thing that we all trying to solve. A few things which have got added to that is in the right quantity and at the right price. Price has become, from a fashion perspective, very key element. Delivering in full is becoming a key element for all of us. And as supply chain practitioners, as leaders, we've all been struggling and doing newer things, trying out many hacks in our overall processes, in our backward supply chain, in our trying to manage the volatility in the demand, which has become highly unpredictable. And we all are living by the hours to be able to deliver what is needed on the front end, keeping the customer in mind. And that's the key thing, because what do we all create a brands for? We create it for the customers at the end of the day. And we need to assess what he wants, why he wants it, what is the usability, what is the functionality for him, and then basis that create a products and ensure that it is delivered on the time when he needs it. It cannot be that I could deliver a summer product in October and think that it is going to sell and I'll be able to make money out of it. So one of the first questions that I think I will start with is, how are the brands or organizations managing the volatility in the demand and the production side? Because managing these two very defragmented sides, or one on the demand side, which is from the inputs coming from the customers, markets, product, trend, bringing them all together and still be able to stay agile and stay nimble to be able to deliver that from a production cycle, which is also constrained due to COVID in a big way. How is this challenge getting handled by many retailers, brands? And I'll request Simar to take this question.
So as for large organized retail is concerned, I think one of the key tools has been how to assess the demand in totality, as well as transparency in transferring that information in a perspective manner. So what we definitely need to do, and what we managed to do at some point of time, is ensure different availability of the information downstream as well as upstream. Ensure that some of our partners are aware of what is going on, because as what COVID has shown us, that different parts across the globe or even across the country may not have full information of what is going on. Regulatory frameworks were a challenge, productions were a challenge, ensuring logistics was a challenge, but maintaining all of that and ensuring visibility of information and making people commit to it in a mindset was, I think, the key to getting this entire supply chain in order.
I'll go back to Sanchit on this same question, because Sanchit, you have a very different supply chain where you were working with a lot of artisans, you're working with, and that's highly unorganized. How are you managing this entire volatility and entire mismatch in the demand versus the supply?
I think, as sir rightly said, we have kind of created more of an inclusive supply chain model, kind of deployed technology at scale to places where it was not earlier. So even downstream, when we kind of work with our craftsmen and our suppliers, so they are kind of, they gave us that data points which kind of help us to, scale our demand. And at the same time, our customers gave us data points which we can pass on to our suppliers to form a more predictable demand for them, actually. Right? And I think a lot of it is kind of helped in connecting these two dots together, which is kind of done by technology today that we have built. And, even when it comes to suppliers, so a lot of times, there is a lot of awareness which needs to be created in terms of making sure that products are visible on the platform. They kind of inventorize their current inventory, And I think that really helps in predicting demand for them.
So this takes us to the question because Sanchit picked up a very, very great input in terms of saying he's trying to solve a lot of these problems through technology. And I have two very, very brilliant people from a technology standpoint, Anil and Anuj. Would request one of you to go ahead and explain us how are you solving these problems from a technology standpoint in terms of bringing this all together. Because it's so defragmented, so many people, different people sitting across the globe could be speaking in different languages. How are you solving this for retailers and brands?
So I basically, there's a quote that I like to go back to, and this is something that came with years of being in this industry, that fashion industry is a graveyard of very good softwares and technologies. The challenges that basically face in this particular part is multifold. One, what do we basically mean by technology, right? So technology should be, one, easy to use, easy to deploy, easy to scale. It should, as Anil before our conversation was mentioning, it should be integrated with the legacy systems. There's always a challenge of that. So keeping in mind all of these things, people usually try to solve problems in a much more complicated way than it is required. It's not required to basically go down to the last level of customization. What you need is an 80% coverage through a technology. There will always be those 20% cases where you are not able to cover or where you will face issues. But if you are able to cover 80% of the problems through some part and you are able to look at that particular aspect, you are able to do majority of the work that is required from technology's aspect.
Anil, how are you solving for LuLu? You guys are opening stores left, right and center with large format stores, owning the entire supply chain end to end. How do you solve it for you guys?
Now the crux to that is we also run legacy systems. So let me come start with that, right? While it looks all good on the top and you have digital technologies, people every now and then comes up with some technology to solve some problem statements. But the crux of it is, right, lies your ERP. How good is your ERP running on? People have changed from ERP, but today I can't go and tell my boss that let's change ERP because there's a lot of investment into that, right? The first part we should be looking at, and while we are trying to do internally also, is change the mindset. How are you going to look at technology? Are you, as you correctly said, are you trying to look at solving 100% of it, or are you just keeping it at 80% and the rest? It's the cornerstones, let's figure it when it comes in. While having said that, everyone from a technology standpoint, the user to the designer to everyone, need to know the impact of this changes. So if I'm going to try to put in the complete ecosystem, I'm going to put a star out there and say this is going to solve X number of problems. Also make sure that the rest of the people know what is the impact of this onto their day-to-day work culture, right? That ecosystem collaboration is something which we are trying to do a lot into it. So mindset, your impact analysis around it, and third, not but the least, I'm going to call it that, but how can you fade away your legacy system slowly? It may be not done in a day's time, it is over a period of time, but how can you move from it and try to solve the very low-hanging fruits first, if you have to call it, and then start looking at the larger, because people try to, when you are sitting in a board meeting, is trying to solve the larger problem. Right? Let's start slow so your culture gets used to what's going on as agility, as a statement.
There's a very interesting point that you put up about is the impact of decision making. So it is across the value chain that, what I second Anil in saying this, that what is the impact of the decision that each and every decision maker is doing and at what stage in the value chain. That is something which is very, very important, and very often it is misinterpreted, and I've just changed the small thing, it may not change. Coming from the fashion industry, a change in a zipper might be very normal for a designer, but the impact of that zipper, the availability of the zipper, does not only create one issue, it creates three. One is what happens to the old one that you'd already ordered and it's already lying in the warehouse. What happens, when are you going to get the new one? The third is, even if you get the new one in time, you're not going to get the goods in time. Now, it could be as what he said before that, if I get the goods in October for what was meant for July or June, so that entire whiplash effect of what is going to happen is huge. So we as leaders or as common decision makers at any stage in the supply chain or even the value chain as what we call it, is very important to understand what decisions are being taken and what is the impact of those decisions.
So, and a subsequent question, a follow-up question, we'll do a good job in terms of creating a technology. Technology guys will bring in a very, very good UI UX, will do a fantastic job at building a good solution which will solve the problem. But at the end of the day, who is going to use that system? You need people to use that system. You need your ecosystem to run that system, that process. Going back to JP, how do you think is your ecosystem within the organization and your ecosystem of your manufacturing cycle, which is so defragmented, and you are using a mix of maybe large manufacturers, small manufacturers across who might not have a great know-how about technology. How are you ensuring adoption for this? Because and how are you getting people to use it and adopt it? What challenges are you facing there?
First of all, I think it's a big challenge. I would say all of us have been discussing the problem statement. I think nobody is discussing the solution statement. So one small changes which we have done post-COVID or in the early stages of COVID within our organization is that initially what happened was when the order was placed from the buying and merchandising team to the manufacturers, and fortunately all our manufacturer happens to be very small time manufacturers. And looking at our ecosystem of retailing, we are actually trying to cater the lowest strata of the people in the country. So to be precise, my apparel ASP is only 200.
So you're dealing with Bharat.
Yeah, exactly. So, and my average ASP of a garment is only 270 rupees. So I don't know how much will I be able to accommodate the high cost technologies and all that thing, but yes, to be precise, what we have done is initially entire ecosystem of my retailing, so we run 102 stores and that most of it is based out in the Bharat, BCD India, and I'm sure most of the people must have not heard about the places where I do retailing. So, and actually to get anything from the down to the head office is equally difficult then something from the down to my manufacturer. But I think yes, what we have done in this last 1.5, 2 years of COVID is, we have tried connecting them. And as Ranjan rightly said, it is equally difficult, to make the entire, so initially there was a silo where the buyer merchandisers used to place order with the manufacturers. Manufacturers used to ship that goods with some relevant transportation to my warehouse. And then somebody else used to take it over and, the sellers used selling it. But I think the first COVID has given it a jolt to all this system where there was huge inventory, left with my manufacturers because we were generally closed in that entire summer thing. So today we have tried implementing a process where the raw material is kept ready, but the final product is not done. I must say it is done with that visibility which is visible from down to my manufacturers directly. I know there are thousands of loopholes there, which we are trying to plug, and indeed more than happy if somebody can help us out on that. But keeping that in mind, my apparel ASP is again 270 rupees only. So I don't have much for technology, but yes, more than happy to adopt any of it. Thank you.
Awesome. So Pankaj, you have a slightly different problem to solve. how are you solving it for Crocs and from adoption in terms of technology? And you said a very, very interesting thing. You have some philosophy. Would love to hear that in terms of how you making the systems and how you making them work.
Sure. So basically what we are doing is ensuring that the real-time data and actionable data is being provided across the supply chain so that end-to-end everyone is aware what exactly is happening. Second thing that we are doing is ensuring visibility to the complete supply chain, because until and unless everyone from start to the end is aware what exactly is happening, where is the product, there are very, very high chances of someone getting confused, or it might take more time, etc., etc. Third thing that we are doing is absolutely simplifying the complete supply chain. When I say simplifying the complete supply chain, meaning having less links, because the more the number of links we will have in this complete ecosystem, that's where the problem will be. Hence, ensuring absolutely simplification of the complete supply chain. And the last and most important is enhancing the customer experience. You know, how exactly our customers are getting the information. Are they able to track what exactly is happening? The answer to this question should ideally be yes. But if it's not yes, then there is a problem. So this is exactly what we are working on with our global teams to ensure there is absolutely clarity, visibility, and some sort of simplification when it comes to supply chain. Thank you.
I would highly encourage the audience, if you have any questions, do raise your hands. We would be more than happy to get panelists, esteemed panelists, to be able to answer them at any point of time during the session. Yes.
So when you say that they get complete visibility, transparency, what's the backend is what that they're using?
Yeah, it's for you because.
Sorry, sir, you said?
I said when you say that you're using complete visibility, transparency, and they're almost similar, what's the kind of backend technology that is being used there?
Okay, so at this point in time, what exactly we are doing is ensuring, so we have a couple of tools in place. That's one. However, there is a project 2 that we are working on right now. And that project is something which might take some time. So the point that I mentioned is something we are currently working on to ensure that this is how exactly it should be for our end customers.
Yeah, I mean, I raise this because, generally accepted that RFID is the future of any
Exactly.
kind of
RFID is
visibility.
one and cloud-based systems is second, is what
Yeah,
exactly.
absolutely. Both can be married together.
Yep.
The data from RFID can go to cloud-based. So RFID helps in bringing the entire supply chain issues in terms of transparency, visibility, where it also takes away the dependency from the people, where you're not manually entering, which can have right or wrong. So you automatically get your data points entered into the ERP or whatever.
Yeah.
So I think that, I don't know if any one of them is using RFID in the supply chain as of now. That will be interesting to know.
RFID is not a cheap technology to implement. So for a low-cost retailer, it will be very difficult to implement RFID, even with Indian manufacturing involved.
No, I understand.
So it depends upon what sector of the economy it is. It is not one technology that will answer to you, but it's not only one technology that will answer. It's an entire ecosystem that needs to be committed. The mindset needs to be there, that whatever information is going to be transferred is transferred well ahead of time and at the time of action. Typically what happens is that there is a lag. A lag may be manual, it may be mindset, it may be overwork of the system. But if the person taking the decision is aware of what is the downstream implication of taking the decision and how IT systems will be able to implement it. It may be just an habit of sending an Excel sheet across from the shop floor that, okay, we've had this kind of an issue and there might be a couple of delay on the shop floor. That mindset is what we need to inculcate as people sitting in this room.
Sure.
That is what is something which is missing. Enablers are many. You can have barcode, you can have RFID, you can implement BLE systems depending upon what is the nature of urgency of your system.
No, completely understand. It's expensive and not everybody can use it. But I think it's also important to understand that when we are looking at a futuristic supply chain, it has to have certain elements built in, especially for the larger retailers. While smaller retailers, it becomes very, very difficult. Today, there are also solutions available where RFID-based working can also, get into the entire planning, which can give you capabilities of self-healing your planning on supply chain. So I think some of those are really futuristic, while adoption will take some time, but it's important that when we are talking about digitalization and automation, we do, understand how some of these can really make a change in improving the supply chain.
Sure. Thank you so much. Thanks a lot. So I think, obviously, the next question, which is also a very, very key piece, is the lead time. What is important from a brand's, from retailers' perspective is to become more responsive. It is not about just being efficient and be able to do the repeated work continuously better, but it's also about being more responsive to be able to react to the signals that you are getting, and reduce your lead time so that you are better prepared, because you really don't know where the lockdown will happen and when you have to cut down on whatever supplies you have. And imagine what you are talking about is it impacts the entire value chain. It's not about you only getting impacted. It's about the logistic guy getting impacted. It's about the manufacturer getting impacted. It's about the mills getting impacted. And the entire value chain is connected today. It's so much more connected. So how does that information flows? So what are you guys doing in terms of reducing the lead time and trying to bring down the manufacturing cycle to a lead time where it is much more sustainable, and where have you been able to reach to? Start with Simar, because you guys have been doing some fantastic work from Reliance Retail, and you guys have been investing a lot in that space as well.
So in terms of getting more responsive is basically having access to your, I would say, your partner's information in today. Information would be, and data, it could be in the form of physical data, that is what are the stocks of inventory that he's holding in whatever form that he's holding it. It will be data on what is his production capability, which is a challenge in India today. It's a very, very big challenge that large organized retailers definitely face. It's a question of how much visibility to give them, because sometimes with the scale at which large retailers work, it definitely scares the hell out of some of these MSME guys. So information exchange is number one. Number two, how do we manage the different silos all across the value chain? So there might be a fabric guy sitting somewhere else. There might be a manufacturing capability somewhere else. And ensuring that that information seamlessly flows all across, number one. Number two, having access to right time, data at the right time in the right manner is what you put in the first place, right? So ensuring that happens at all touch points across the value chain. So that is the effort that we are all concentrating upon in our organization, right?
JP, going back to you, how critical is this becoming? Because for you, with the kind of price points that you talked about, how is this impacting you guys?
To be honest, I think this is a huge challenge, and likely what Simar said is that something like WhatsApp needs to be created, which is user friendly and cost effective. Indeed, zero cost. I think that's the best answer. And second piece is the continuous training. I think each of us as an organization should take this as a challenge, because these were the points which we never thought of prior to all this. I mean, say, generally if you take an apparel manufacturing cycle, 6 महीने में बन के आता था, 1.5 महीना warehouse में पड़ा रहता था, 3-4 महीना वो shop floor पे बिकता था, and then the USS and all that thing used to happen. But I think those are stories of past. We'll have to actually cut down everything now. Now, how does that happen? I think he's right, saying that yes, we'll have to create visibility for everybody, and that visibility has to be readily readable, understandable, and actionable. Most of the organization, what happens is, not to name the big ERPs, but I think there's too much of data which is thrown to you, but at the end of the day, how to use it? I think that's where the question is.
It's really overwhelming.
And especially for an organization like me, where cost and investment is a constraint, So I think we'll have to figure out as an ecosystem where something is very, very cheap, very user friendly, and then obviously the training has to be imparted, both ends, people inside and the manufacturer and your supplier partners outside, everybody.
Anuj, how are you guys helping in terms of as a technology partner? How are you guys helping in the retailers and the brands do this? Because this is a large problem in terms of reducing the lead time and manufacturing as close to the season as you can.
So before I jump into that question, there are two data points that I read in a report just before the COVID. One was that the lead times on a year-on-year basis are reducing by almost 16 to 17%, and the number of styles that we produce per volume, per specific volume, is also around 15 to 17% is increasing. So if I had to translate it in a layman's language, what that basically means is that in 4 years' time, for the same capacity that any brand is at this point of time doing, will need to do it at half of the lead time with twice the number of styles. Now, that's where technology actually comes in play. Because yes, definitely, it has to be cost effective. It has to drive in a lot of these things. But this is a very big leap. And this was a report, mind you, before COVID, which came in. So after COVID, it has just become exponentially bad, right? So technology will definitely play an important factor over here. And the mindset change that everybody has been talking about has to be more in terms of that retailers and manufacturers of apparel and of fashion need to start looking at their businesses as technology business, primarily going forward, rather than manufacturers and retailers of business. And then basically drive the, everyone has already made those points which we basically are trying to incorporate into everything, into the supply chain, which is basically bringing every manufacturer into an easy to use kind of a technology so that they are able to we are able to track that data on an end-to-end basis for every single supplier, for every single PO, for every single style. So once we basically build that ecosystem, what, let's say, any of the brands would be able to do going forward is that, let's say, if I have a certain amount of style that is supposed to be produced, I know out of the 200 vendors that are there on my platform, which vendor would be able to do it at what time, what is the lead time that you would be required, what quality level, what efficiency. All of those parameters are then recorded onto that particular platform, which enable that entire decision making in a much faster way for everyone on the supply chain.
Sanchit, going back to you, so what impact will all of this have on the cost of the product? You're reducing the lead time, you're investing a lot on technology, you're adding costs at all places. How is the product cost going to get influenced because of this? Because at the end of the day, the customer is going to buy a product at a cost, at a price.
See, I think COVID had an impact in terms of the cost of the raw materials itself in the entire sector, right? So coming from an apparel sector and, you know, kind of developing apparels both for domestic and international market, I think raw material pricing is something which is on a spike in the last, I would say, 18 months of time. So that itself has kind of made way for us to think about how we can reduce our cost, how we can kind of plan much better in terms of what we are building for the customers. And I think in apparel, a lot of what we are doing currently is in terms of making sure that we kind of understand what we did in last summer collection and how we can implement it in this summer collection, where I know that 40% of my cost is my fabric cost and 40% of my fabrics are my hero fabrics, which I'm going to use again, right? So I think that's where kind of helps to reduce lead times and cost, where it is kind of procured much in advance, which is kind of much in volumes actually, depending on as to what is going to sell in the current season based historically of what we have done. And I think secondly also, in terms of how we analyze and how we kind of do a lot of design research ourselves, how we kind of do a lot of trend research ourselves, which helps us predict a lot of demand beforehand, right? So I think these are some of the steps which have kind of helped us in keeping our cost in check, and also at the same time coming out with a product at a much shorter lead time, I would say.
I slightly beg to differ. I think, the problem with the entire ecosystem of manufacturing in this country is blocking everything well in advance, right? That's not saving actually. I think the key takeaway from this discussion, this room should promise saying that इस साल हम 3 महीना पहले ही order देंगे. And can we do it? Can we backward work? I think that should be a challenge which we should take. I mean, it's very easy for my the manufacturing guy and my supply chain partner or my manufacturing partner to say, यार तू ये white वाला fabric तो रख ले, ये तो 5 साल चलने वाला है. कितना मीटर रख ले? 50 लाख मीटर? But that's not going to, that's the part of the problem, not the solution. I think as an industry, as a manufacturer, as brand owners, we'll all have to take a pledge and then incorporate technology, visibility, saying that how can I reduce all this? Abhi what are we trying to do is, my part of the problem I'm trying to park it with somebody else. Bhai, tu sab kuch ready karke rakh, I'll tell you when to take. That's not inclusive growth, like it is parking your problem with somebody else. So the whole idea is how can we efficiently use technology, seamlessly create visibility between the last leg, which is my store, with my manufacturers, and say that we need to keep reducing time, and internally we'll have to benchmark saying that this year it was 4 months, next year it was 3 months, next year it has to be 2 months. How? That is what jointly we'll have to figure out.
So interesting thing. So what you're saying is I think there's some question there, but interesting point that you're making is as an industry, we'll have to make an effort to do this. This cannot be delivered by a manufacturer, by a retailer, by a brand alone, by a male guy alone, or the trims manufacturer alone. As an industry, we will all have to strive towards becoming more responsive, becoming much more in terms of being able to deliver at shorter lead times.
Ranjan, to be
Ranjan, the
honest,
problem-
this year as a brand, we have taken a pledge. Winters will only start 4 months before October. That's it. And I know it is difficult because I now get calls from my people down under saying that fabric महंगा हो जाएगा, मिलेगा नहीं, stuff like that, you know. But I think we'll have to take it as a challenge. As you rightly said, we'll have to take it as a challenge for the industry.
I think there are two aspects to this, right? One from an ecosystem aspect. We run our own silo strategies. How much of your vendors are part of your strategy, or how much of your mindset thoughts are you pumping into them? How much are you going and training them to be ready for 4 months, 2 months, 3 months, depending on what category you're working on? That's one part of it. The second part of it is, while I'm trying to do a strategy, while I'm trying to do some activities, can the ecosystem support us in that nature, right? Like for example, and I think we all are now taking our benchmark as COVID, the pandemic, right? To do something. There's life beyond that. We were doing something before this, right? Why not we come out of the box and start thinking again? Why are we only thinking about, oh, next pandemic comes in, next lockdown comes in, I will do this. Okay, let's get out of the box and say, oh yeah, pandemic came, pandemic went, that is one of the scenarios. What are the other scenarios which can happen to us? Can we get the ecosystem ready for it? The agility part of it is a key to it.
We're all used to working in waterfall. That is typical product management jargon, right? So everyone is used to pehla hoga, dusra hoga. How are we going to work in parallel? Number one. Number two, as what he rightly said, was that, the mindset has to change. The mindset has to be of a delivery. It's not only that you take care of one person or yourself. It has to be the whole industry. That is very, very important for at least all of us in this room. That's very, very true.
Have the mic? Yeah.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Chetan, and in fact, I was sharing what Simar said based on that, that if you look at the entire lead time from the order till the store, one of the biggest aspect is the fabric, which is typically from 45 days to 90 days, which further where commitments are poor. So coming from a fabric background, what we've implemented in the last 2 years based on IT is that we've made our fabric inventory management all barcoded, everything on the system accessible to the buyers. So the factory and the brand can see how much inventory on fabric is lying with us, and they can plan their response time much more quicker. So that's a small change which is happening. I think across the trade, similar practices are coming in. We're learning from brands like you how to get more responsible on the fabric side. And also just a comment on what you said is I would like to understand, because a lot of times if my buyer wants us to keep some inventory, which will reduce his response time, so somewhere that inventory has to be parked. Now, without projections and without commitments, somewhat that doesn't work. We get projections without commitments, so we do not know how to work on that.
There's the entire finance ecosystem that needs to be built in the country. So yes, as business leaders,
I think that's, yeah.
Finance cost is also something that we all as business leaders need to commit to and understand that how is the liquidity or the bloodline of the system is going to work. Yeah, that is one challenge that is there in India, how to have unstructured finance, how to have structured finance. At what rate is it going to be made available? Is it going to be competitive or not competitive? That is something that is there something all across. And it's a big part of the supply chain scenario today. It's just not data, it's money flow as well.
Concern was not the finance, it is more on commitment. Projection hai, finance, yes, this down the line somewhere money is involved everywhere. But I get order for 100,000 meters, but later on the orders come for 80,000 meters.
We don't know what to do with the rest. Guarantee होनी चाहिए. पैसा नहीं होगा तो आप माल बना के क्या करोगे? So there has to be skin.
I think it
has to be skin in the game.
So I think it's both. It cannot be one over the other. You have to take care of both. So I think it's an interesting input. But what has come up very, very clearly, sorry because the time is up and we'll have to cut short. We would have gone on and on. we can definitely meet after the session and we can have that chat. But I think one important takeaway, at least from my perspective, is how do we collaborate better? How do we work together? And how do we change the entire industry and take everyone along with us rather than working in silos? And rather we as brands, as retailers, as manufacturers trying to solve our own problems. How do we all come together? How do we create enough visibility so that, and how do we come onto single ecosystem, a similar ecosystem where we are able to work together in much better way, bring in more transparency, bring in more visibility for each other to react, to be able to action out, and there is enough data that we are generating. So how do we create more actionable data for each other so that all of us can respond to it? So I think it was a very great session. Thank you so much, guys. An amazing session, but would have loved to take more questions, but thank you so much. Time is up, but we'll continue to chat after the session as well.